Hey, good day, folks. Welcome to another episode of Andrew's Life. I would say about a year ago, roughly, I had done a video to where basically I drove through the city of Indianapolis. On this video, I'm going to be driving through the city of Indianapolis as well. Except on this video, I'm going to be driving primarily from the northeast side to the west side of the city. And the areas that I'm going to be driving through on this video are going to be different than the areas I drove through on my last Indianapolis video. So, however, this video is not going to be so much about Indianapolis. It's going to be more about, it's going to be more about why certain people are moving back to the city, and also why I believe this whole narrative of the big bad city is being pushed, and why I believe on different media sources, especially here on YouTube, and also on other social media platforms, the whole small town movement, the whole buy a piece of land and set up a tiny home and live off grid movement is being so heavily pushed. Now, for starters, I tried to do a little bit of research to give you guys some statistical information for me to put this video together, but either A, the information that I was looking for, I was unsuccessful at finding, or B, the information that was out there, I look at that piece of information and then I'll go somewhere else. I look and another site would say something completely different. So I would say a lot of the information that's out here, in my opinion, is conflicting. So basically this video is not going to be based on hard data. It's going to be based on just some of the things I have observed over the last 10 years or so. And some of the things I've observed while traveling the country for the sake of this channel, and also traveling the country because I travel a lot. And also, another thing, for those of you that are new to the channel, another thing which you guys need to understand about me is I do live in a small town. I enjoy living in a small town. So as you watch this video and you listen to the commentary, just bear that in mind. And before we get going on the video, Indianapolis, for those of you that care, Indianapolis has a population of 887,000 people, than 642 people, and this city had a 8.2% population growth as of 2020 census. Now, Indianapolis has been a growing city ever since they began to record the census of the city's population back in 1840. The only census year where Indianapolis actually lost population was during the census year of 1980. And during 1980, Indianapolis lost 5.9% of its population. But every other year, Indianapolis has been a growing city. And a lot of what I'm getting ready to say is basically talking about major cities in general. I'm not talking about any one specific city. I'm talking in general here. Now, the only two pieces of data that I do have, which I do think are legitimate, and even I have my doubts about these pieces of data, is according to our world in data.org, 83% of the U.S. population lives in an urban area, up from 64% in 1950. That's as of right now. 83% of the U.S. population lives in urban areas. Now, by 2050, it's projected that 89% of the U.S. population will live in urban areas, and 64% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. So I'm going to try to make this video to where I'm clear and everything I says makes sense. So let's get started. Now, for starters, I think the reason why a lot of people are moving to major cities. Well, let me back up. Now, I'm pretty sure many of you who currently are watching this video have seen the larger cities in your home states undergo a considerable amount of gentrification. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen buildings being built in areas that don't make sense. Like, for an example, you might be driving through the hood where the average house is going for, let's say, less than $100,000. But then just out of nowhere, you see this big apartment community or this condominium community being put up. And if you were to do a little bit of research on that project, when those buildings get built, each unit might be projected to sell for, let's say, $250,000. Well, you're thinking, okay, they're full of it. How can that be? This is the hood. Nobody's going to pay that kind of money for that building. Well, my friends, that is the nasty G word that is going on in that particular community. That G word is called gentrification. And gentrification is going on all over the country. Now, some people believe that gentrification is primarily meant to put African Americans at a disadvantage, and gentrification only benefits the white community. Now, I guess to some degree that belief could be debatable. Now, me personally, I'm gonna, although sometimes it does seem like that, I also try to look at gentrification from a business standpoint. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys that I agree with gentrification. I'm not saying that at all. But what I will say is, when I look at what's going on in a lot of your major cities, and I look at it from a more business perspective, rather than getting all emotional and being like, woe is me, poor me, how can they do this to people like me? I try to look at things from a more business and, I guess to some degree, practical perspective. Now, when you go into a lot of your lower income neighborhoods, unfortunately in those areas, the crime is typically going to be higher. Typically, those are the kind of neighborhoods that are going to bring the entire city down, so to speak. So, I think the reason why more and more cities are partaking in gentrification is because many of these cities desire to increase their bottom line. They desire to be able to collect more tax revenue for the city. How does the city collect more tax revenue? Well, there's a combination of things that have to happen in order for a city to effectively increase their tax revenue. Number one, they have to attract new businesses to move to the city. Well, if the city has a reputation of it being high crime and the average income per capita in the city is low, that's not going to attract high quality businesses to move to the city. So, how does the city improve their crime numbers? How does the city increase their average income per capita? They have to make the city to where people of a higher income class are going to want to live. They're going to have to make the city to where higher quality businesses are going to want to move their organization to. How do they do that? Well, they have to go into a lot of your poor, crime-infested neighborhoods, and they have to begin to gentrify those communities. Now, some people are saying, okay, well, maybe the city needs to implement more programs for the kids so they stay off the streets and stay out of trouble. Maybe they need to provide more services to help those who are less fortunate so they don't resort to crime. And then, of course, there's the whole argument about certain people that are gaining resources and they're not even citizens of the country. And that's a whole nother argument, which I'm afraid to discuss on YouTube because I don't want to, I'm trying to grow my channel, so I need every penny that I can make. But anyways, there's all kind of solutions that many of us can come up with that these cities can exercise other than gentrifying the city. But going back to me looking at this whole gentrification process that many cities are partaking as a business. Now, looking at things from a more business perspective, these cities do not care about you being poor. They don't care about what you need, what you're lacking. They don't care about any of that stuff. All these cities care about is money, their bottom line. That's all they care about. I mean, I hate to be harsh, but that's all they care about. So whatever they gotta do to increase their bottom line, i.e. the tax revenue, they're going to do. So therefore, part of the gentrification process means sometimes if an area is super high in crime, they're gonna have a lot of law enforcement officials in those neighborhoods that are gonna make a high number of arrests. And there's gonna be a high number of those individuals being locked up for a long time. So while a lot of these people are sitting in jail or they're sitting in prison, that many more homes are going to potentially become vacant. And once those homes become vacant, it's going to make it a lot easier for investors to go through and buy those homes for literally pennies on a dollar. Now, in some of these neighborhoods, they have a program here, and I talked about it briefly on an older video, and I forgot what the program was called. My apologies. But a lot of your major cities have different programs to where basically they'll sell a home for, let's say, $1. And those homes are going to oftentimes be in the hood. So what will happen is you'll have developers that will go through and they'll buy a bunch of those type of houses. Now, sometimes the house might be more than $1. Sometimes it's $1, sometimes it's $100, sometimes it might be $1,000. It all depends on the program and in the city. And a lot of times there'll be all kind of stipulations to go with that. You're not just going to get the house for $1 or $100 or $1,000. A lot of times they'll have stipulations such as, okay, you can buy this house for, let's say, $1,000, but you have a year to make this house to make this house habitable. So a lot of times people that have a little bit of money, they might take advantage of those kind of programs, and they'll buy the house, they'll fix it up, and depending on the kind of program that it is, they'll flip it, they'll sell it. And when they sell that house, they're going to sell it for much more than what they paid, obviously. And depending on what's going on, like, let's say they buy a house to where the average value of the home is, let's say, $100,000. Well, by the time they get done fixing the house, they might decide, you know what, we're going to sell this house for $150,000. And if enough people come forth and they're willing to pay that $150,000 for that house, then sooner or later, people who are in that kind of business, and they move to these cities to buy these cheap houses, and they fix them up and they flip them, sooner or later, someone's going to be like, you know what, I'm going to sell my house for $175,000. Later down the line, you know what, I'm going to sell my house for $200,000. So pretty soon, a neighborhood to where the average house may have sold for less than $100,000, now that same neighborhood, the average house is now selling for $250,000. So basically what that's going to look, for those of you that don't realize how property taxes work, what that is going to look like over time is, obviously, your property taxes are going to increase. And as property taxes increase, it's going to bring more tax revenue to the city. So to the city, it's going to be a win-win situation for gentrification to go on in the city. It's going to be a win-win situation. Now, unfortunately, when gentrification goes on, a lot of the communities that get gentrified are communities that are predominantly black. Now, as I've said before on this channel as well, for those of you that are black and you're watching my video, and you like where you live, you like your community, you're not going nowhere, all your kinfolk there, your family there. You, back when you was little, you remember going down the street to the park to play on the swing set. So you're not going to move. Well, my best advice that I can give you, if you feel like that, is you need to talk to your friends. You need to talk to your family. You need to if you go to church, you might want to talk to the congregation who goes to your church, to include the pastor himself or herself. And you all need to put some money where your mouth is. If you don't want gentrification coming to your community, this ain't going to be a guarantee, but the best thing that you can do is, number one, invest in your community. How do you invest in your community? You buy in your community. Like, rather than paying rent for the rest of your life, if you know you like where you live, you do what is necessary to purchase your home. And for those of you that have an entrepreneurial acumen about yourself, purchase some of the commercial buildings in the area and start businesses. Now, unfortunately, in many of your black communities, many of the black communities tend to have an unspoken code of no snitching. So another thing that you can do to decrease your community from being gentrified is to get rid of the no snitching. Like, whenever someone does something that they shouldn't be doing, go ahead, call the cops, call law enforcement. If that person goes to jail for 10 years, oh well, they shouldn't have been fucking around. And that's the kind of attitude that the black community needs to start to have for all the criminals that want to go out here and commit crimes. And, it then got to the point, it's to the point now where you got 13-year-olds that feel comfortable walking around with life counselors and canceling people out. And so that's another thing that y'all can do to decrease the chances of your community being gentrified. Get a handle on the crime in your community. People that want to commit crimes in your community, hold them accountable. How do you hold them accountable? If they're breaking into people's homes, if they're breaking into people's cars, if they're in the streets up to no good, call law enforcement. Well, I ain't gonna call no law enforcement, man. These law enforcement officials are prejudiced, man. They don't like black people. Nah, man, I ain't using no law enforcement, man. Forget all that. Okay, fine, don't. But then when you wake up and you see your community get gentrified, don't wonder why. Don't complain. Just understand that those type of actions are going to come with dire consequences. Now, like the community I'm driving through, which I've been driving through, which is one of the nicer parts of Indianapolis. I mean, for those of you that live in poor communities, if you want your community to look like some of the nicer communities, you can have that. All you gotta do is take some pride in your drilling and pick up the garbage off of your yard. Quit throwing garbage, like when you're driving down the street, quit throwing garbage out the window. Put it in a garbage can instead. And for those of you that are renting houses, cut the yard at least once a week during the summer. So just to rehash real quick, if you don't want your community to be gentrified, some of the things you can do to decrease that chance of your community being gentrified is hold criminals in the community. The criminals that be in your community, hold them accountable by utilizing the city's resources, which in this case would be law enforcement. B, if you don't currently own your home, go ahead and do what you gotta do to become a homeowner and buy the home in your community. And C, go to your church, talk to your friends, talk to your family, and share that message with all of them. And also, for those of you that want to become an entrepreneur, go ahead and put yourself in a position to where you can ultimately buy some of the commercial buildings within the community to set up your business. Now, I know some of you are not going to like what I got to say. It's going to piss some of you off. But that's not my intentions here. I'm just keeping it raw and uncut, and I'm keeping it real. You see, some of the politicians that may have coddled the black community, patted you on the head while stabbing you in the back, telling you guys that they like you when they really don't. Hey man, I ain't with all that. I'm trying to tell you, I'm keeping it raw and uncut with you people. And that, my friend, is some of the reasons why that gentrification is going on more so in predominantly low-income black communities than anywhere else. Now, when it comes to gentrification, although it could be said that gentrification will benefit the white community more than the black community, yeah, that's true. However, let's be realistic here. Now, the sector of the white community that gentrification is going to benefit the most are going to be the upper working class to the upper class. Now, many of your working class whites, gentrification is not going to benefit those people that much, if any at all, because the majority of those individuals are working the same type of jobs that many blacks are working. They're working some kind of a 9-to-5 job at the plant. They're not out here owning businesses. They're not CEOs. They're not working high-level paying white-collar positions. So, so let's understand that gentrification is going to primarily benefit the working class I mean, the upper working class to the upper class. And with that being said, you're gonna have a few minorities that gentrification will also benefit, because some of them are going to also move to these new gentrified areas as well. Give me 1 second. All right, folks. Sorry about that. Anyways, another reason why I believe that many of your major cities, with more to come, are undergoing or will be undergoing gentrification, is because if you do the math, the majority of what goes on in the States or what goes on in a regional area is going to typically go on in the metro. The majority of the businesses that the wealthy own are going to typically be in or close by a major city. Now, for the longest time, many of your wealthy people been leaving the city and they've been moving out to the suburbs. Some of them may have been moving out a little further out in the country. But I think one of the reasons why you got certain people with money, that desire to come back to the city is because, think about it for a minute. Okay, they come back to the city. They have to pay a higher, they're going to most likely pay more for their house in the city these days compared to what they may have had to pay living a little further out. Property taxes are going to most likely be higher in the city than in areas further away. However, when you calculate the cost of gas, the wear and tear on the vehicle, and with the current vehicle prices being what they are, the price that you have to save up anymore in order to be able to buy you a vehicle. I mean, the average cost of a new car, just a plain Jane basic subcompact economy type of car, is $35,000 anymore. As where I remember back when I was a kid, for $35,000, that would have bought you a Lexus. $35,000 now, that buys you what, a Toyota Corolla? So when you factor in the cost of a new vehicle, the repair and the maintenance cost of a vehicle, slash wear and tear, the cost of gas, when you factor that in, and then you compare that to what you'll have to pay in, let's say, property taxes, and even the price of the home, a lot of wealthy people, their attitude is, okay, well, if I buy a more expensive house and live in a city, in most cases, their house is going to typically increase in equity. And on top of that, since they're not going to have to pay as much for transportation, they can take some of that money and put it back into their house, which in most cases, their home is going to increase in equity. And the extra hour or two that a lot of these people who live a little further out or having to drive into work, they figure, hey, if their business or their higher paying job is located in the city, they can save, let's say, an hour to maybe 2 hours per day of commute time. That's an hour or two each day that they can exhibit habits to where they will be healthier. Like either A, they can take that time and sleep in and get more rest and be better rested for the day. B, they can take that time and go to the gym and work out. They can take that time and do a little bit of meditating. They can take that time and maybe go online and do some research about how they can grow their business, how they can grow their portfolio, ways to become more wealthier, or they can read a good book that will in some way enhance them. And plus it'll be, just good for the brain to read. And that's typically the way that many wealthy people think. Because I think more so now than ever before. I mean, now that as a country we're not so much into agriculture as we used to be due to technology. So with that being said, many of your wealthy people of today, they're not thinking so much of owning a ton of land. I mean, having a house with an acre or more is not as important today as it used to be. With all the grocery stores out here to where you can just go and you can conveniently buy you an orange or a banana or whatever it is you want to buy, it's not as important to people to own a bunch of land as it used to be. Now unless you were gonna be a farmer or you desire to live off grid, I mean, for the most part, having a large lot is not as important today as it used to be. And families today are also a lot smaller than in the past. So I think anymore, a lot of people who got some money are more so looking to find ways to make their life better, to be healthier, to make their life easier. And sometimes paying a little extra money for their home is worth it. So I think it's more of a... So yeah, like I said, I think another reason why many cities are being gentrified is because the wealthy would desire to hang on to as much of their money as possible. And when they do the math, it's going to actually be more financially beneficial to pay more money for their home and to pay a higher property tax than it is going to be to have to, than it's going to be to have to spend money on wear and tear on their vehicle, plus having to buy new vehicles more frequently due to putting the miles on more. And again, what I just said is not based on research. It's based on just what I think, and what I think is based on what I would call common sense, along with just some of the things that I've been observing over the last 10 years or so. Like right now, this area I'm driving through right now, I believe it's close to downtown. Now, some of these crappy looking houses that you guys see, they've, most likely they're going to probably be torn down and something new will be put in its place. Now, I will say, like, when you go to some of your neighborhoods closer into the city here, like on the west side of the city, I mean, one thing I do notice is there are a lot of Hispanics that live on, like, if you go to the west side of Indianapolis, like towards town on the west side, and also going out towards Speedway. I mean, if you were to drive around that area, you'll notice that there's a sizable Hispanic population that lives out there. And one thing I do notice about some of the foreigners who have been moving here to the United States is, and again, it's going to piss off some of you, but the truth is what it is some of them have a more, some of them, the way they think, it's more in line with how wealthy people think. Like, rather than buying something that's super expensive, many of them tend to buy something that's a little more, that's a little more modestly priced. They tend to buy something that's in the city, to where they're close to work, they're close to amenities, and the amount of driving they have to do is minimal, which means they're not going to be tearing up their car as much, they're not going to be burning as much gas, and they're not going to have to spend quite as much time commuting to and from their job. And I've lived in, now back in the day, when I used to live in the city, I mean, now that I think about it, I mean, I want to say back in the early 2000s, like in 2003, I want to say, I had a job working as a security officer in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. And there was this one fella that always rode his bike to work. He rode his bike to work every day. Now, real nice fella. And I forgot what his position was, but he made, I forgot what he did, but he made a six-figure income. Now, remind you, this is back in the early 2000s. So just imagine how far a six-figure income went back in the early 2000s in Louisville, Kentucky. So this man was making bank. And one day I just asked him straight up. It's like, do you not have a car? Why are you always riding your bike to work? And he told me that, well, I only live 2 blocks away. And I ride my bike to work because 1, it's good exercise. And 2, I save a lot of money on transportation. Which to me made sense. And then I got to thinking, okay, well, if you're driving 2 blocks or so in your car to work, you're not blowing a lot of money on transportation anyway. I didn't say that to him, but I was thinking that in the back of my head. And then as I got older, I got to thinking, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He killed 2 birds with 1 stone. He's getting the regular exercise, which is keeping him in shape, which is keeping him away from a bunch of medications that you take when you're not in shape and your health is bad. Because this man was also in shape too. This man, at the time I talked to him, he was in his early 60s. And then one day he drove to work because the weather was real bad. So, one day I saw him get out of his, he had now mind you, this is in 2003. Now he had a 1990 Ford Escort. This car was an old school. I stared at the car, I stared at him, and I was surprised because I was thinking, okay, he's making good money. He's probably driving around in something fancy like a Lexus. No, this fella then drove in a 1990 Ford Escort. So at the time, this car was 13 years old. So I looked at his car, and it's like, man, your car looks good. And it's like, yeah, I've had this car since brand new. I mean, since brand new in 1990, I've had this car. And I asked him, well, how many miles you got on this car? And at the time, he told me that the car had something like 50,000 miles, something ridiculously low. And then he told me, well, see, this is why I desire to ride my bike to work as opposed to drive. Because when I don't tear my car up by driving all the time, the car will last longer. The miles will stay lower. And he told me that, I do not like buying new cars. And at the time, he tried to explain the math of why he doesn't like new cars. Now, at the time, financially, I was an idiot. So I kind of understood where he was coming from, but then I kind of didn't understand. Quite frankly, at that point, I don't think I even cared because I was an idiot back then. But he tried to explain how when he buys a car, he typically will keep the car. Like he told me the car he had before that, he kept that car for 25 years. And then he gave it to his son. And the car that he was driving back in 2003, he's like, I plan to keep this car for a very long time. I'm not going to buy a new car and then have to pay a higher insurance premium and plus have to make a car note payment. So when I buy a car, I try to have it to where whenever I buy a car, I pay cash. And I keep the car for 25 to even 30 years. That way, I'm not buying cars on a regular basis. So I guess I tell you that story just to tell you guys, just to kind of help you guys understand the reason why I believe you got people that are wealthy or people that make good money that desire to live in the city as opposed to living further out. And if you guys pay close attention to what's going on out here, like wherever you live, all you gotta do is visit the closest major city to you, and then just visit the closest smaller cities to you, or what they also would consider to be bedroom communities. Like for an example, here in Indiana, here in mid-Indiana, of course, Indianapolis is going to be the major city. It's going to be the major metro. And of course, you have your suburbs like Fishers, Carmel, and all that. And then your bedroom communities would be cities like Anderson, Kokomo, and maybe Anderson, Kokomo. I mean, those would be examples of what they would call your bedroom communities. Basically, smaller cities that are within an hour of the metro, but are not considered suburbs. And another trend that has been going on in many of your cities is, as these cities continue to be gentrified, and as more people with money are moving to the city, I mean, at the same time, one thing that I'm beginning to notice more and more in many of your smaller cities is, some of the undesirables who used to live in the metro have been priced out of the metro. Like for an example, some of the undesirables that have been priced out of Indianapolis are now moving to places like Anderson and Kokomo. And now some of the issues that used to only plague larger cities like Indianapolis are now starting to show themselves in cities like Anderson and Kokomo. Or if I were to talk about Fort Wayne, I would be talking, the bedroom community there would be one of the smaller cities out there would be Marion. I think you guys get the picture. So as time goes by, and I hate to say this, but as time goes by, I do firmly believe that in time, the small city, I'm not talking small towns, I'm not talking the country, but I'm talking many of your small cities are going to become the next breeding ground for all types of for crime. Like a lot of times right now, whenever you hear about some shootings going on, a lot of times you hear about that kind of stuff primarily in larger cities. And I predict maybe in the next 20 years tops, a lot of that is gonna change. It's gonna be more and more that you're gonna hear crimes like that going on more so in many of your smaller cities than you'll hear going on in the metro. And again, I could be wrong, and I hope I am wrong. But I'm just, I consider myself to be a realistic person, so I try to. So when I talk about this type of stuff, I try to be logical here. And that's one of the reasons why that I prefer to live in a small town. Or if I could find somewhere that's out in the country, but not too far out in the country, I would prefer that. Because my attitude is if I live in a small town or I live somewhere in a rural community, I'll live close enough to at least a smaller city. See, here's how I do it. See, basically, this is my little setup. Like wherever I choose to live, whether it be a small town or a rural community, I try to pick locations to where I'm within, let's say, 10 minutes of a small city. I'm also within an hour of a major city. I try to pick locations to where I'm close to the city. I'm close enough to the city to where it's not going to be a field trip just to do some grocery shopping. It's not going to be a all-day journey just to get to work. So I'm close enough for all that, but I'm far enough away to where when it comes to all the crime and riffraff that typically goes on in the city, I'm far enough away to where those type of activities are not going to find their way to my neck of the woods. And that's the type of setup that I try to implement for myself whenever I look at buying a home somewhere. And that's the type of setup which I think many people are implementing for themselves as well, not just me. Because my attitude is, I don't have enough money to buy anything decent that I desire that's located in the major city. I clearly don't have enough money to buy anything that I want that's in the suburbs. And even when I look at houses in smaller cities, like for an example, Anderson or Kokomo, I mean, if I wanted to buy something in those cities, I could. But to be quite frank, the reason why I don't is because I do predict that as these cities continue to gentrify, a lot of the undesirables who are currently living in the metro are going to find their way into smaller cities. Like the example I'm going to give you guys right now, a lot of the undesirables who get priced out of Indianapolis are going to find their way into Anderson and Kokomo and other small cities that are within an hour of the metro. So to try to prevent myself from having to deal with those low caliber people, I try to have my setup to where I'm close enough to do what I gotta do, but I'm far enough to where certain calibers of people are most likely not going to move to where I'm living. Now I know what I just said, it sounds stuck up, but I really don't care. That's how I feel. It is what it is. Because my attitude is I work hard for my money. I'm a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen. I do not want to live by people who do illegal stuff. I do not want to live by people that want to throw parties all the time. I do not want to walk outside and all of a sudden I got people parked out in front of my house wanting to sell stuff. I do not want to live somewhere where I got females walking around looking for someone to pay them for favors. No, thank you. I lived in areas like that before, and I'm glad that I no longer have to live in those kind of areas no more, and that's how I intend to keep it. And that's another reason why many of your major cities are being gentrified. Because as people who make a substantial amount of money, i.e. the higher working class to the wealthier people, I'm going to keep it real with you folks. I'm going to keep it real. When these people come back to the city, they don't want to deal with any kind of riffraff. They don't want to deal with people out and about selling illegal substances around them and around their family, around their children. They don't want to have to deal with female workers walking around trying to solicit their services to them. They don't want their children around that crap. They don't want to be walking down the street and now they're stepping over needles like what's going on in parts of the West Coast. So those are, just off the top of my head, those are some of the reasons why you have gentrification going on in many of your major cities. So again, when I look at what these cities are doing in terms of gentrification, I try to look at it from a business perspective. And looking at it from a business perspective means, however I feel personally doesn't matter. It doesn't mean shit. No one cares about it. Whatever these cities feel that they need to do to attract a higher income earning, whatever these cities have to do to attract higher income earning residents, whatever these cities have to do to attract larger, higher quality businesses that are gonna contribute more to the tax revenue of the city, these cities are gonna do. So yeah, for those of you that are upset because your neighborhood is being gentrified, you done lived in your area since you was yay high and blah, 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 this, and that, and the third. You know what? No one cares. Nobody cares. Like I told you earlier in the video, I told you what you need to do. And I'm gonna reiterate this. This is for those of you in the back of the room. I'm gonna tell y'all again. If you do not want your neighborhood to be gentrified, the best thing that you can do is, number one, invest in your community. Rather than paying rent, buy the houses in your community. Become a homeowner. Number two, for those who are in your community committing crime, I don't care if it's your brother, your sister, your uncle, your father, your moms. I don't care if it's Pookie or Ray Ray down the damn street. I don't care who the hell it is. If they're in your community committing crimes, you need to go ahead and do your part in You need to do your part and hold those individuals accountable and call law enforcement. Now, for those that want to retaliate on people that try to do the right thing, y'all need to cut that out. Y'all need to cut that out. Y'all need to get rid of the no snitching, the unspoken no snitching policy. You need to throw that shit in the garbage. And for those of you that want to be an entrepreneur, you need to find a way to eventually work yourself into where you can open up a business in your community. You can buy one of the you can buy some of the commercial buildings in your community. Now, I understand what I'm saying. To many of you, what I'm saying, it might seem impossible. It might seem like I'm way out in left field and I'm not even in reality right now. And if it seems like that, well, congratulations. You have completed the very first step in figuring the issues that your community is having. Because every other community out here, that's what they do. They invest in their, like I'm gonna give y'all an example. For an example, when you look at some of the Hispanic population that has moved to the United States, I mean, many of them, they invest in their community. They purchase and fix up and renovate houses in their community. They purchase the commercial buildings around their community and they turn them into businesses. And they sell products that cater to their culture. So, in closing, for those of you that live in communities that are currently undergoing gentrification, or maybe you fear that gentrification is on the way to your community, y'all need to get together and you need to invest in your community. Because if you don't invest in your community, ultimately somebody else will. And when they do, it is not going to be for the benefit of you or your family. It's going to be for the benefit of their family, their people, their culture. And again, this message, and since the majority of the communities that are being gentrified happen to be lower income African American communities, for those of you that like where you live, you don't want to move. For those of you that are running around talking about how the white man is stealing your communities and this and that and the third, the white man stealing your communities, the Hispanics, they're stealing from your communities as well. So for those of you that feel that way, for those of you that currently have that mentality, understand one thing. If you don't invest in your community, for you, nobody else is going to invest in your community. In fact, one thing which I predict happening to many of you who currently live in these communities that are on their way to being gentrified is, and I'm hoping this doesn't happen to you guys, but I do predict this happening. I mean, pretty soon, there's not even going to be a black community as we know the black community to be today. Pretty soon, the black community is going to consist of just a few buildings around the city. I'm not talking any Pacific City. I'm talking in general. Pretty soon, you guys are going to wake up. You're not going to have no driveway to park your car. You're not going to have no yard. Pretty soon, a lot of you guys are going to wake up and your communities are going to consist of several buildings, kind of like the way they have it up in a lot of your larger cities in the Northeast. You're not going to live in houses, you're going to live in buildings. You're not going to have driveways. You may not even have a parking lot. You'll have to park in the street. You're not going to have a yard. You'll have like a balcony. And your neighbor is not going to be the next house over. Your neighbor is going to be the next wall over. Your neighbor is going to be the next floor below you or the next floor above you. Your neighbor is not going to be across the street. Your neighbor will be across the hall. So for those of you that live in these kind of communities that I'm driving through right now, and you like where you live, and you do not want your community to be gentrified, the best advice I can give you is you need to get it together. You need to start holding people accountable within your community that are doing things that are not within the best interest of your community. You need to put your money where your mouth is. You need to quit going out here and buying $75,000 automobiles and take that money instead and start to invest in yourself, invest in your future. I mean, because as you guys saw earlier, I mean, I want to say maybe just a couple of minutes ago, if you go down the street from where I'm at right now, you'll see where they've already built a whole bunch of new houses and condos. In a minute here, I'm going to turn around and then I'm going to drive you guys through the subdivision where there's a whole bunch of new condos and new houses. And pretty soon, this community, this particular neighborhood I'm driving through right now, is no longer going to be the way it is today. And that's going to be due to gentrification. And see, you look in front of, now you look ahead, look at all those new buildings. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of these new buildings used to be filled with older houses. Kind of like what you saw just a second ago. You see all that? And I don't even know what these are selling for or what they're renting for. I have no idea. I didn't even look it up. But just off the top of my head, if I had to take a wild guess, I would say a lot of the condos are probably selling for at least $250,000. And the houses are probably selling for $300,000 and some thousand. Again, I don't know. I didn't look it up. But I'm pretty sure that the numbers I'm putting out are close. Or two, there could be far more. There could be much higher. And I'm pretty sure if these units are up for rents, you're probably looking at close to a couple of $1,000s a month. Or at the very least, you're looking at $1,500 a month. But I'm going to say anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 a month is what it's going to cost for you to rent out one of these units for those that might be available for rent. So yeah, for those of you that live around here, for those of you that live in some of these lower income areas that are undergoing gentrification, I mean, just, like I said, the best way. Now, for those of you that are watching this video and you're not from an area that's undergoing gentrification, like for an example, if you're from Montgomery, Alabama, or you're from even Birmingham, Alabama, this is going to be the future of your city one day if you guys don't get it together down there and start to put your money where your mouth is. And because there's a lot of there's some major cities in the deep south that have not underwent gentrification yet, like Birmingham. I mean, they've already began to gentrify the downtown, but the rest of the city has been untouched in terms of gentrification. Montgomery, they've done a little bit of work downtown, but the city of Montgomery, they ain't really done crap in terms of gentrification. And given that both of those cities I just named off have, both of the cities I just named off, if you live in any of those cities, or in another city that hasn't really underwent any kind of gentrification, is Mobile, Alabama. And so if you live somewhere in any of those cities, or you live somewhere in southern or central Georgia, I mean, what you guys are looking at right now is gonna pretty much be the future of your city if you guys don't get it together down there and put your money where your mouth is and actually invest in your community and to hold the bad actors in your community accountable. I mean, if you don't do that, this is what your city is going to be looking like. You're going to have a bunch of new buildings all over the place. You're going to have a bunch of houses just slapped together next to no yard. And you're going to see your cost of living go up substantially to the point where you'll be priced out of the city. And now you and your family will be scrambling around for a place to live. And then ultimately you'll end up in no man's land. Or you'll have to move an hour from your job into a smaller city. All right, folks. I think I've said enough on this video. And hopefully you guys got something out of my commentary today. I just wanted to put this video out just to kind of give you guys my 2 cents on what I believe is going on. And, I know for the African American community, I've been harsh on this video, but it's real. It's coming from the heart. And it's a message that you guys need to hear. I mean, there's no elected officials that are going to tell you what I told you just now. All they're going to do at best is pat you on the head and tell you that it's all good, while they got a knife and they stab you in your back. And then they gentrify your community, and then you're wondering what happened. So, because there's people that might make a video like this, and they're going to get into their emotions of what they're going to get into their emotions and blame it on racism and all that kind of stuff. Me, I try to look at the business aspect of it all. So, yeah, I think I've said enough here. So, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. If you like what I said, if you like what I said, you can give this video a thumbs up. If I pissed you off, you know what? You can still give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, consider doing that, because I will be putting out a lot more videos. All right, folks, stay blessed, and I will catch you guys on the next one.